One of the most ambitious goals of PM Modi has been to set a $5 trillion GDP target for India. To understand the importance of this goal, let's focus for a moment on Asia, where 60 years ago in 1962, the GDP of China was $47 billion, and that of India was just $5 billion less. In 60 years, the GDP of China has gone from $5 billion of a difference to becoming a staggering 6 times that of India. Projecting this differentiated growth, in 10 years GDP India would become a minor component of GDP China, with a clear impact not only on people but also on security. Clearly, PM Modi wants to hold that trend by setting a $5 trillion GDP objective by 2024. But how can that target be reached? In today's digital world, cheap labour is no longer India's best competing tool. Other Asian countries are getting into the market. To offset the same problem, China with BRI has opted to go for a huge financing integration of physical structures that would increase the speed of deliveries and promote its production. This is indeed a great strategy for a top emerging world power to undertake, but India could do something more modern, which would be less intrusive on the state's political independence and perhaps more beneficial in the long run. In the 51st year of the internet age, an immense GDP growth can come to India from the mass of people's digital knowledge education. India could speed up the velocity of knowledge circulation to a much higher level. See formula in last slide of this pill. But there is something else. People forget that the real power of the digital economy is not just the fact that it's high tech, but also the capacity to join that top high tech with the communication of a mass number of people. That's not very well understood, and that's why even in the USA, it's California with Silicon Valley and Hollywood that play the leading role in the world. Thanks to the GDKP model, India is certainly the only nation in Asia, and probably in the world, that could play California's game. GDKP-INDIA is a double-sided coin, high-tech and communication. In the forthcoming conference in 2 states in India, organised by one of the best Indian digital companies, we are going to propose launching the idea of a new Silk Road, India's knowledge new Silk Road. This would be the 21st century's most modern alternative to India's physical knowledge infrastructure from Bangalore and Hyderabad and from Maharashtra. GDKP-INDIA in a nutshell is a popular publishing product that will be presented at the aforementioned conferences in India. It will be broken down topic by topic to outline basic benefits to government, people and business. All in all, 100 small pills. It will be a unique publishing product for mass distribution sold at a very cheap nominal price, but the video recordings included on it, such as this one, will be played for free on YouTube. Unfortunately, some people involved in the making of GDKP-INDIA have made slight technical and managerial mistakes. We'll be analysing these in detail in Pills 4 and 81 to 90. The introduction of GDP was also strongly opposed in the USA by people who didn't understand the immense political economic value and who were not able to share the vision of future benefits. They chose not to favour solutions. Fortunately, the promoter of GDP, the Ministry of Commerce, was steadfast in his views, and so late in the 90s, GDP was regarded as the century's most important innovation in the field of economics. See Pill 76. We are absolutely confident that GDKP-INDIA, thanks to NITI's top managers, will follow the same path. NITI Aayog, the most important think tank in India, chaired personally by PM Modi, has decided that in the interest of India to lead the first GDKP in the world. As we shall see in the next pill, the Vice Chairman of NITI, Dr. Kumar, is the first Indian economist to understand its importance, and India in the future will have to credit him for its adoption. But as we shall see in Pill 8, GDKP-INDIA receives strong operational support right at the outset from the CEO of NITI for what he calls India's first. With such qualified support, there can be no doubt that technical and managerial mistakes can be solved easily. Both NITI's visionary managers will lead the way in championing a modern vision of wealth of nation for the world. I met the CEO of NITI Aayog, Dr. Amitav Kant, at an online conference held in Los Angeles at the Center for the Digital Future in the Annenberg School of the University of Southern California. Dr. Kant was invited to make the inaugural speech as he was the chief executive of the think tank that was working on making the first GDKP in the world a reality. His speech was very well received by a truly international audience. Economists from different countries appreciated his full commitment to make India the first country to measure the wealth of nations based on the most important raw material of the world, knowledge. Dr. Kant remarked, "We in NITI Aayog are delighted that Professor Sulpasso has insisted that India should be the first country to undertake this pioneering endeavour. With India's rich cultural, spiritual, scientific, innovative knowledge, together with its demographic size, there couldn't have been a better country than India to begin measuring GDKP." The CEO of NITI couldn't have expressed my personal motivation in a better way when he said, and I quote, "India takes the GDKP project seriously, and NITI Aayog is convinced about its benefit not only for India, but also for the rest of the world, especially in the Southern Hemisphere." Professor Sulpasso and Dr. Kumar have rightly identified the pressing need to capture the economic value of the immaterial goods of a country in the form of knowledge, not only traditional knowledge, but also the immense knowledge circulating in the cyberspace. "We are moving ahead," pledged the CEO in a really great speech, "though COVID inevitably slowed us a bit down, but now that we have our own vaccine and a large program for vaccination underway, we are confident that we can move faster. We'll be very happy to share the knowledge we gain with the rest of the world. We believe that knowledge cannot be monopolized." But let's focus for a moment on the role of NITI Aayog. This very important think tank will be recognised as the key reference point for the pilot GDKP in the world. In Pill 3, we will focus on the official decision of the Government of India to follow NITI's advice. And in Pill 2, we will talk to Dr. Rajiv Kumar, the VC of NITI, a world-renowned economist who has been working on the first ever GDKP calculation in India. When we met, we both knew that GDP as a measure of wealth of nations was strongly criticised, but we also knew that no real alternative had been offered. Even the OECD Sarkozy-Stiglitz Committee failed to see that the wealth of nations is a concept that doesn't necessarily mean wealth of people. The CEO of NITI emphasises that the inclusion of immaterial values in GDP is a critical area that needs to be addressed. GDP doesn't have to be substituted, but rather reconstructed. We have to find a way to incorporate it into the GDP so that immaterial factors of wealth of people, such as health, climate, environment, security, and most challenging but most fundamental, the basic country's culture, can be included. And all this in a non-discriminatory way. The OECD committee didn't consider that for the first time in history that was actually possible. And lest we forget, the internet and the World Wide Web gave voice to billions of people. The economist's challenge is to make that voice be considered in GDP. As we shall see in Pill 31 to 50, we had to find a common minimum denominator able to quantify those elements. The internet offered a solution: knowledge. But not traditional knowledge, because the daily exchange of billions of messages on the concept of knowledge had changed. The population explosion of billions of people in what the Greek called in the word agora resulted in the production and circulation of knowledge made by common people that affected all material production of goods and services, politics and security. Knowledge, therefore, was the suitable minimum common denominator for most of the immaterial goods to be incorporated into the GDP. So what kind of knowledge does cyberspace produce? By whom? And how fast can it circulate? Who buys it? Who sells it? And what kind of knowledge can be produced for what is needed for each specific country and for its people's health, climate, environment, security? The whole point was to maintain the GDP, but we had to start appreciating it within the role of GDKP. And here we are. Thanks to Dr. Kumar, the GDKP of India will be the first attempt to estimate the value of the mass production of knowledge. And thanks to the CEO of NITI, as we shall see in Pill 7, the National Statistic Commission has given the green light for it. With GDKP-INDIA's inclusion into GDP-INDIA, the classical new measure of wealth of nations is becoming wealth of people, and it's going to affect hundreds of millions in the population of India. We have prepared 100 pills, video texts only a few minutes long, to explain directly to the Indian population the benefits for them from the NITI initiative in promoting the calculation of the first knowledge product in the world. By multiplying the value of knowledge produced by the mass with the velocity of the circulation of that knowledge, GDKP India can become the highest GDKP in the world. Of course, we have to find the most appropriate tools to perform that operation, but it is worth it. The highest GDKP in the world can enter into direct competition with the highest Chinese GDP in the world. Not that there is a need for competition, but rather there is a need for mutual sustainability. As an alternative model of increasing GDP, the GDKP model adopted by India can offer a solution for the economies of Asia as well as that of China itself, but also a viable route or pathway to the world's new economy growth that we can call the Indian GDKP New Silk Road, a powerful initiative to attract financial capital around the world to grow and protect the planet from raw material depletion, climate damage, and so forth. At the same time, a greater access to personal tools for growth will be available. An Indian GDKP will favour a greater development of the GDP, but by including criteria of, for example, climate change in the environment, it can contribute to achieving a fairer society. Technical errors. One of the first objectives of GDKP-INDIA is to compute the ratio GDP to GDKP, which we call the K factor of GDP. K factor is a modern version of the Keynesian multiplier, and for budgeting and market reasons, we also want to define the K factors amongst different sectors of all the economy of India. Those numbers are of such importance that we cannot risk making any technical mistakes. But unfortunately, we did encounter some problems. Every statistician knows very well that we cannot divide apples by oranges. That ratio would have no meaning. The same statistical principle must be applied to the making of the ratio GDP to GDKP. Knowledge items that are part of the prototype and part of the final GDKP have to be extracted from the GDP with aggregations and disaggregations, but we must be careful not to invent new criteria of evaluation. NITI doesn't have to invent anything, and if it did, it would make a terrible mistake that would make it impossible to construct the ratios. Let's turn now to managerial mistakes. CSO, the institution that calculates GDP-INDIA, is the actual institution that will have to detect the data in order to calculate GDKP. NITI has to identify the knowledge items. CSO has to quantify the value. Of course, we must work together. I met the senior officers of CSO to talk about GDKP, and I was really impressed by their very bright and intelligent questions. I realised that once the working of the model was properly explained, we would jointly be able to make a perfect GDKP-INDIA. And we have to apply to the same principle to MOSPI. We have to work with them to jointly construct the NDM, the National Digital Managed GDKP. The coordination of NITI doesn't have to substitute CSO or MOSPI. That would be a huge mistake on both the technical and managerial levels. We must simply work together. The CEO of NITI's ambition to make GDKP-INDIA the first in the world is an excellent one, and the Government of India can make GDKP-INDIA the highest in the world. To achieve those goals, technical and managerial mistakes must be avoided, and I'm personally convinced that the CEO will prevent them. The Chief Executive of NITI is a reformist manager, marketing strategist, and a top government official. His specialist fields include industrial development, technology and investment, all areas where the support of a GDKP-INDIA will be crucial. The CEO of NITI fully understands that knowledge is the main tool which needs to be spread all over India's production system to achieve a much higher level of innovation, productivity and wealth. See Pill number 53. His last book, Shifting Orbits, Decoding the Trajectory of the Indian Startup Ecosystem, co-edited by Geoffrey Thomas, a professor at the Indian Institute of Management, shows clearly that the K factor of nation and the K factors of sectors of the economy is needed to sustain startups more effectively. Therefore, the Chief Executive will need the statistical structure of IS, International Standard GDKP-INDIA, CPILs 40 to 45, and for policy decision and making the NDM, the National Digital Managed GDKP-INDIA, CPILs 46 to 51. These are the two pillars of India's first measure of knowledge wealth of the country. The Chief Executive of NII, author of the marketing concept of branding India, played a most relevant role by personally emphasising the importance of the GDKP model to the National Statistical Commission. And to his great merit, his presentation won NSC's green light. A great achievement indeed. But now the Chief Executive and Vice Chairman of NITI have perhaps a more challenging task than the scientific one, because it's going to involve some psychological hurdles that could unduly delay this achievement. CPILs 75 to 80.